Hey, what's going on, friends? It's Slash687 back at it again for the 4th day in a row. And I have decided to make this PC build. It is a $400 PC, similar in price to the video I uploaded 2 days ago with the Greenham Gaming inspired used parts PC. I'm going to compare them and I'm going to show you guys what kind of performance you're going to get out of both the Greenham Gaming inspired PC you saw in the last video as well as this $400 new parts PC. Now obviously I don't have the money to build both of these systems as I'm just a poor high schooler, but I'm going to try to give you guys a basic idea of the difference in performance you're going to get. Because it's very surprising how much more performance you can get if you opt to go for the cheaper used parts instead of buying your parts brand new off of Newegg. First off, the CPU. I have the AMD FX-4300. It's a 3.8 GHz quad-core CPU, 4 physical cores, 3.8 GHz, and you can overclock it if you get the proper aftermarket cooling. It's not the most powerful CPU in the world. It's getting a little bit dated in 2016, but it pairs nicely with the GPU I got, so it's gonna do for this $400 build. Next up, I have the motherboard, which is a Gigabyte GA970A socket AM3 Plus motherboard. It's a full-sized ATX motherboard with up to 32 gigabytes of RAM support. It has USB 3.0. It's gonna fit anything you could possibly want. 32 gigabytes of RAM is more than enough for this system. We're only gonna have 8 in it, and it'll do you well for the next few years or however long you want to keep this PC. Next up, we have the RAM. I went for 8 gigabytes of G-Skills memory. It comes in 2 4 gigabyte sticks, so you can take advantage of dual channel. It's DDR3, it's clocked at 1600 megahertz. And it does what RAM needs to do. 8 gigabytes is perfectly fine, especially for a build like this that's fairly low budget. Up next, I have the storage. I went with a Western Digital 500 gigabyte 5400 RPM hard drive. It's Western Digital, so it's going to be fairly reliable. It's only 500 gigabytes, and for an extra $7, you can get a 1 terabyte hard drive. So if you have the extra $7, I'd recommend doing that, but I just chose this so I could fit the $400 price range. It's only 5400 RPM, so the speed is not that quick, but for a hard drive, I'm not really looking for speed, I'm just looking for storage capacity, so it's going to be just fine. If you want speed, just pick up like a 120 gigabyte SSD and throw that into the cost of the build, but obviously I don't have the extra money within the build to allow for an SSD. Next up, arguably the most important piece of a gaming build, the graphics card. I went for an ASUS GTX 950 2GB graphics card. A GTX 950 is the perfect graphics card for a system in this price range. It supports SLI, it supports G-Sync, it supports a lot of features that a GTX 750 doesn't. It has the Maxwell architecture just like the 750, so you can overclock it fairly easily because the Maxwell architecture's cards have a very low TDP and they don't get too hot, so it's a very good card for this build and it's going to do just fine in 1080p middle settings gaming. For the case, I went with a Corsair Spec 01 ATX mid-tower case. It's a mid-tower case, so there's plenty of room in there for our graphics card, which is not very large at all. Pretty much any case can hold a GTX 950. It has plenty of room for airflow, and a mid-tower case is just a very nice size to have. It's a very nice looking case, doesn't look too flashy, but still looks distinct, and I like it a lot. The Corsair Builder series. Now that's a very good power supply. I went with a 430 watt, 80 plus bronze certified ATX power supply. It's only $20. That's very cheap for a power supply, especially a Corsair power supply, because they are renowned for their high quality power supplies. 430 watts is plenty for this build, especially since we have the very low power consumption GTX 950, and if you want to upgrade to a beefier graphics card in the future, you're going to have to update the power supply, but for the time being, a Corsair Builder Series 430 watt is plenty. So let's compare this system to the one I discussed yesterday. So in the video yesterday, I had a choice of 2 graphics cards. You could either go with a GTX 960 or you could go with an R9 290. Now I'm going to compare both of these graphics cards' performance to the performance of the GTX 950 in today's build. I know this test is not going to be scientific whatsoever, but it's just to give you guys a basic idea of what the difference in performance should theoretically be if you get both of these systems and there's no kind of CPU bottleneck or any of that. So as you can see in these graphs I have right here from just the internet, which makes this unreliable, I'm gonna add, so you don't need to point out in the comments, it's just to give you guys an idea. We see a 45 to 55 increase in Metro Last Light, going from the GTX 950 to the GTX 960, and then if we go from a GTX 950 to an R9 290, we see a 66.6 repeating percent increase. So in pretty much all games, the GTX 960 when compared to the 950 gets a 10 to 15 FPS bump, and then the R9 290 in all games gets about a 25, 30, or even a 35 bump when compared to the GTX 950. So it all depends on your choice. As you'll notice in my last video, I said that the R9 290 used is kind of unreliable and you're not really sure if it's going to work or not when you purchase it. And the GTX 960 is refurbished, so it's a little bit more reliable than the 290, but it's still refurbished and it's not 100% new. If you get the GTX 950, you're getting a 100% new product. You gotta keep this in mind. It all depends on if you're more focused on reliability or if you're more focused on just sheer performance right here, right now. It's a decision you guys gotta make yourself. I can't make it for you. You gotta weigh the costs and the benefits. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to leave a like, be sure to comment, and if you're new, be sure to subscribe. I'll see you guys later. I hope you enjoyed. Peace.